He was just driving home, wearing a suit, when the sirens lit up behind him. A cop pulls him over, no reason, no warning, just suspicion. But here's the twist. The man he stopped? He's the head of internal affairs. And what happened? Next, flip the badge and the power on its head. You won't believe how this ends. Before diving into the story, comment where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the latest stories. It was just another quiet evening in suburban America. The kind of evening where the golden sun dipped below the rooftops, casting long shadows on freshly cut lawns. Children played in backyards, dinner smells floated from open kitchen windows, and everything seemed peaceful. But not for Marcus Hill. Driving home from another long day at work, Marcus sat behind the wheel of his sleek black sedan, jazz music, humming softly through the speakers. His navy suit was still perfectly pressed, tie slightly loosened, briefcase in the passenger seat. He looked like success. He was success. But success didn't protect him from suspicion. As he turned onto a quiet street lined with trees and picket fences, he saw them, the flashing red and blue lights in his rearview mirror. His stomach sank. Not again, he muttered, signaling and slowly pulling over to the curb. The patrol car rolled up behind him aggressively. The door swung open with force, and out stepped Officer Bradley, tall, bulky, mid-40s, and walking, with the air of someone who believed he owned the road. Bradley didn't wait for pleasantries. He didn't ask for license or registration. Instead, he pointed and barked, "Step out of the vehicle." Marcus took a deep breath, hands visible, and opened his door slowly. He was calm. Too calm, perhaps. He'd been through this dance before. Too many times. Still, something about this officer's tone felt more hostile than usual. "Where are you headed? This your car?" Officer Bradley asked, one hand on his holster, the other scanning Marcus from head to toe as if trying to catch him in a lie. Marcus looked him in the eyes. "Yes, officer. I'm headed home. Is there a problem?" But Bradley wasn't really listening. He saw a black man in an expensive car in a quiet neighborhood, wearing a suit that probably cost more than his month's salary. And he made his judgment right then and there. He didn't need a reason. He just needed a target. Without warning, Bradley told Marcus to put his hands on the hood. Marcus raised an eyebrow but complied. He didn't want to escalate. He knew how quickly things could go wrong. The pat-down was rough, unnecessary. Bradley searched Marcus like he was expecting to find a weapon, drugs, or anything that could justify this stop. "You always dress like this when cruising through neighborhoods like this?" Bradley asked, smirking, trying to provoke a reaction. Marcus didn't bite. "Just coming home from the office," he said. Bradley scoffed. "Sure you are." He checked Marcus's pockets, felt the inside of his blazer, and then he paused. His fingers touched something hard, something official. A badge. Officer Bradley pulled it out, confused at first. He held it in front of his face, squinting, reading the name and title etched in gold. His expression changed instantly. "What? What is this?" Marcus straightened up slowly and turned to face him, calm, but with a sharpness in his gaze. "That's my badge. Marcus Hill, Director of Internal Affairs." The silence was deafening. Bradley's face went pale. Internal Affairs. The department that investigates police officers. The department that could end careers with a single report. He stepped back instinctively, his power suddenly gone, replaced with fear. Marcus fixed his suit jacket and looked directly into Bradley's eyes. "You stopped me for no reason. No license check. No explanation. You profiled me. You assumed I didn't belong, and you acted on that assumption." Bradley opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. The confidence, the swagger, the hostility, it all drained away. Marcus didn't yell. He didn't curse. He simply pulled out his phone and started recording. "From the moment you stopped." "Me, this encounter was based on bias. That will be noted in my report." He circled the car slowly, documenting everything. Badge number, vehicle number, dash cam position. You didn't follow procedure. You skipped identification. You used intimidation. And you performed an unlawful search. Bradley finally managed to speak. Look, maybe we got off on the wrong foot. I didn't realize who you were. That's the problem, Marcus interrupted firmly. You wouldn't have done this if I were a white man in a suit. Or if you knew my title. But without that knowledge, you treated me like a suspect, like a threat, simply for existing. Marcus got back into his car. Before closing the door, he looked at Bradley one last time. I'm not filing a complaint. I'm filing an investigation. And with that, he drove off, leaving a stunned Officer Bradley standing in the middle of the street, exposed, caught, and deeply shaken. The aftermath: within 24 hours, Officer Bradley was suspended pending investigation. Internal Affairs dug into his record. Dozens of traffic stops, mostly targeting minorities. Complaints from citizens suddenly resurfaced. The silence around him was breaking. Marcus didn't go public to get revenge. He went public to spark change. He released a statement. What happened to me isn't rare. It happens to thousands every day. But this time, it happened to the wrong person. Communities responded. Media picked it up. Conversations began. Officer. Bradley's badge was eventually taken. Not because Marcus wanted vengeance, but because justice demanded accountability. Without a word of explanation, Officer Bradley forcefully spun Marcus around and pressed him against the side of the car. The sudden aggression drew a sharp breath from Marcus, but he remained composed. His hands instinctively spread across the hood, palms flat, fingers extended. He'd been through this before, too many times. The cold steel of authority was something Marcus Hill had felt long before he earned his own badge. Before the polished shoes, the tailored suits, and the corner office downtown. But tonight felt heavier, more deliberate. This wasn't a traffic stop. This was a statement. Bradley's hands moved roughly across Marcus's back, then down each arm with practiced force. The officer muttered under his breath, suspicion coloring. Every movement. You always dress like this to cruise through neighborhoods like this? He asked, his voice laced with mockery. Marcus could hear the sarcasm dripping from every syllable, but he didn't respond. Not immediately. He knew better than to feed the fire. I think you're making a mistake, he said finally, his voice calm but firm, like a warning in disguise. Bradley scoffed. The only mistake here, he snapped, now patting down Marcus's sides, is you thinking you can drive around here like you're some big shot. He leaned in closer, now near Marcus's ear, as if trying to intimidate him with proximity. Marcus felt the heat of his breath, smelled the bitterness of coffee and entitlement. But he didn't flinch. Suddenly, the scene shifted slightly. A second patrol car pulled up behind them. Its engine idled as red and blue lights danced off the windows of nearby houses. Another officer sat inside but made no move to approach. He was watching, but not interfering. Officer Bradley didn't wave him over. He didn't need help. He thought he had this under control. After all, this was just another stop, another suspect, another box checked. He continued the search, running his hands down Marcus's legs, checking for weapons, drugs, something that would validate his suspicion. But there was nothing. Then, as he reached into the inside pocket of Marcus's jacket, his fingers touched something unfamiliar. It was flat, metallic, and rigid. Not a weapon, not a wallet, a badge. Bradley pulled it out slowly and stared at it. At first, confusion crept across his face. His lips moved silently as he read the engraved text under the glow of his patrol cars. Lights. Marcus Hill, Director of Internal Affairs. Time stopped. His face paled. It was as if all the blood drained from his head and pooled in the pit of his stomach. He looked up from the badge, meeting Marcus's eyes that no longer seemed powerless or ordinary. Eyes that now held authority. Real authority. What is this? Bradley asked, his voice suddenly fragile. His earlier confidence dissolved into uncertainty. Marcus turned slowly to face him, straightening his suit with deliberate care. He looked at Bradley like a man assessing a situation he no longer needed to fear. "That's my badge," Marcus said simply. "I'm the head of internal affairs for this region." There was no anger in his voice, no shouting. No threats, just clarity. Bradley stepped back as if the badge itself had burned him. His eyes flicked toward the second officer, still seated in his car, and back to Marcus. I didn't know," Bradley stammered. Marcus raised an eyebrow. "You didn't ask." The silence that followed was deafening. The only sound was the low hum of the cruiser engine and the crackle of a police radio in the distance. Marcus continued, "You didn't ask for ID. You didn't tell me why I was stopped. You jumped straight to a pat-down." "Why?" Bradley fumbled for words. "Protocol. Precaution. I thought. You thought I looked suspicious." Marcus finished the sentence for him. "You thought a black man in a suit driving through this neighborhood didn't belong." Bradley opened his mouth again, but Marcus held up a hand. "Save it," he said. "This entire stop was unlawful. You violated procedure. You profiled me. And you made assumptions that could have ended very differently." He pulled his phone from his pocket and began recording. Bradley instinctively reached for his belt, then stopped. "You're being recorded now," Marcus said. "Not for social media, for internal review." He walked around the car, capturing video of Bradley's name tag, badge number, and patrol vehicle. The other officer still hadn't moved. Whether from guilt or fear, he remained a silent witness to the unraveling of a colleague's career. Marcus stepped back toward his car and opened the door. But before getting in, he turned one last time. "I'm not going to yell. I'm not going to threaten you. But I am going to report this. And when the review board sees this footage, they won't need me to say a word." He paused. "You thought you were in control, but your power doesn't come from the badge. It comes from integrity. And tonight, you lost both." Marcus slid into his car, started the engine, and pulled away, the cruiser's lights fading in his mirror. His heart was steady, his mind clear. He didn't need revenge. He had something better. Justice. Officer Bradley pulled the badge from Marcus's inner jacket pocket and stared at it like it was a foreign object. His confident posture faltered. His scowl faded. "Wait, what is this?" he asked, voice cracking with confusion. Marcus turned to face him slowly, straightening the cuffs of his jacket with deliberate calm. His expression was cool, controlled, yet every word hit like a bullet. "That," he said evenly, "is my badge, Marcus Hill, Director of Internal Affairs." For a moment, Bradley just stood there, the badge still in his hand, as if unsure what to do with it. The silence between them grew heavier with each passing second. Internal affairs. The words echoed inside Bradley's mind like a siren. He blinked, once, twice. And then it hit him, like a cold wave crashing down on a warm day. The man he'd just profiled, pushed against a car, and treated like a suspect, wasn't just another civilian. He was the very person responsible for investigating officers like him, the department every cop quietly feared, the watchdogs of law enforcement. Marcus let the moment sit. He watched the blood drain from Bradley's face. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "You stopped me for no reason, didn't you?" Marcus asked, his voice like stone. "You didn't even ask for my license. You assumed. You judged. And you acted." Bradley opened his mouth, searching for something, anything, that could explain away what just happened. But the words never came. His lips parted, then closed again. His throat worked silently. There was nothing he could say that wouldn't sound pathetic or incriminating, because he knew every action, every word, every aggressive move. It was all now evidence. Marcus took a step forward, not in threat, but in authority. He reached out and took his badge back, slowly, firmly, from Bradley's limp hand. "Do you know how many reports I read every week just like this one?" He continued. "Unjust stops, illegal searches, profiling, abuse of power." He held the badge up between them. "And now you've added your name to that list." From the second patrol car behind them, the other officer was now out of his vehicle. He didn't intervene. He stood awkwardly by the hood, clearly having heard what was said but not daring to approach. His expression was mixed, part worry, part shame. The sirens no longer blared, but the tension, it screamed. Bradley finally found the courage to mutter, "Something. I didn't mean to." But Marcus cut him off with a raised hand. "Stop. Don't insult me with excuses." His eyes didn't waver. "You meant every bit of it. The way you looked at me. The way you gripped your holster. The way you never once considered I might actually belong here. That I might be more than your assumptions." He paused, letting the weight of those words settle. "You weren't policing. You were hunting." The second officer looked away, guilt evident on his face. He seemed to understand that the night had taken a turn no one could undo. Bradley, now, visibly sweating, tried again. "Look, I just thought maybe—" "You thought wrong," Marcus interrupted. "And you thought it with a gun at your side, a badge on your chest, and the belief that no one would hold you accountable." He turned his back to Bradley and began speaking into his phone. "Date, time, location. Officer involved. Bradley, badge number 4721. Unlawful stop, failure to provide cause, illegal search, racial profiling." Bradley held up his hands in protest. "Come on, man. Do we really have to do this?" Marcus turned slowly. His eyes were cold now. Not cruel, but tired. Tired of moments like these. "You tell me. Did we really have to do this?" Bradley looked around, as if hoping the street might swallow him whole. But the quiet suburban neighborhood didn't offer him an escape. Porch lights were on, curtains shifted in nearby windows. Silent witnesses to what had just happened. Marcus continued recording. He walked around Bradley's car, recording the license plate, the body cam, still conveniently turned off, and the second officer's patrol number. The second officer raised a hand in surrender. "I wasn't involved," he said quickly. "I just pulled up." Marcus nodded once. "And you watched. You didn't stop him. That's involvement." He tapped his screen and ended the recording. There was no yelling, no threats, just the heavy weight of realization settling in the air. Finally, Marcus turned back to his car. He opened the driver's side door but hesitated before stepping in. "This won't be handled on the street," he said over his shoulder. "It'll be handled by the review board, by policy, by the truth you never expected to face." He looked directly at Bradley one last time. "You wear that uniform to protect, not to intimidate, but tonight you proved you're not worthy of either." With that, Marcus stepped into his car, started the engine, and drove off slowly. No sirens, no dramatic tire screeching, just silence, a silence that screamed accountability. Bradley stood frozen. He wasn't in control anymore, and for the first time in his career, he knew what it felt like to be the one answering the questions. Marcus didn't yell. He didn't threaten. He didn't need to. He just spoke. And his words carried more weight than any shouting ever could. He stood firm, suit sharp against the setting sun's glow, holding not just a badge, but truth. "You see, Officer Bradley," he began, voice calm but edged with cold precision. "This is exactly what we're fighting against. People in uniform, using authority to enforce their bias. People like you." Bradley couldn't respond. His mouth was dry. His hands, once confidently resting near his holster, now trembled at his sides. He'd been on the force for over 12 years. He'd done traffic stops hundreds, maybe thousands of times, but never like this. Never with his career hanging by a thread, and certainly never while facing internal affairs right there on the street. I wasn't speeding, Marcus continued, voice unwavering. I didn't run a stop sign. I didn't swerve or drive recklessly. I was simply non-black, driving through a neighborhood you decided I didn't belong in. The silence that followed was deafening. No sirens, no radio chatter, just the heavy thud of truth slamming down. Bradley shifted uncomfortably, glancing at the second officer still lingering by his cruiser. But no help was coming. This wasn't something you could shoot your way out of, talk your way out of, or call for backup to escape. Marcus reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. With a few quick taps, the screen lit up, and he pressed record. "This is your reality check," he said clearly, the camera focused directly on Bradley. "Everything you've done tonight, your tone, your threats, your illegal search, will be part of a formal report, and trust me, it will be reviewed." He turned the camera toward his own badge for the record. Marcus Hill, Director of Internal Affairs. He turned it back to Bradley. "You never even asked for ID. You went straight to control. That speaks volumes." Bradley's voice finally emerged, weak and defensive. "Look, I just thought maybe you were—" Marcus raised a hand to silence. "Him? No, don't finish that sentence. Because whatever you thought, it wasn't based on anything but my skin color and my car. Let's not pretend this was about law enforcement. This was about ego and fear and bias." Bradley looked down at his boots. The weight of years of unchallenged authority was now pressing down on him in ways he hadn't anticipated. For the first time in his career, he wasn't the one asking the questions. He was the answer. The second officer finally spoke, awkwardly. "Sir, is there anything I can do to—" Marcus turned to him. "You stayed back. You watched. You didn't step in. That's complicity." The officer didn't argue. He just nodded, almost ashamed. "Let me be clear," Marcus said, shifting back to Bradley. "This isn't about ruining your life. It's about accountability. You wear that badge. You swear to serve and protect, not judge and intimidate." His voice softened. Not with forgiveness, but with depth. "You're supposed to be a guardian of the community. But tonight, you treated me like a threat for no other reason than a stereotype you never questioned." He paused, letting the moment breathe. The wind rustled the leaves in nearby trees. A dog barked in the distance. Porch lights flicked on as neighbors peeked from windows, having heard the confrontation, but unsure of what it was all about. Now, they knew. Marcus stepped closer, not threateningly, but with a deliberate calm that made his authority clear. "What if I wasn't internal affairs?" he asked. "What if I was just another black man coming home from work? You'd have humiliated him. You might have escalated, maybe worse. And he'd have no badge, no platform, no protection." Bradley looked up, eyes meeting Marcus's for the first time with something other than arrogance, regret, fear, awareness. "That's why this matters," Marcus said. "Because there are people out there who look like me, drive like me, live like me, and don't have a badge to protect them from people like you." He took one final glance at the badge pinned on Bradley's chest. "You've disgraced that shield tonight. But the difference is, I'm holding you accountable. No cover-ups. No brushing this under the rug. This ends here." Bradley nodded, slowly, defeated. There was no use resisting now. He knew Marcus's words would be written into an official statement. The footage on his phone would be reviewed. His body cam, if it had been on, would only confirm Marcus's story. But worst of all, the trust he'd betrayed couldn't be undone. Marcus put his phone away. "I'll be submitting this to the ethics board first thing in the morning. Expect a formal hearing. You'll have your chance to explain yourself under oath." He turned, heading back toward his car. As he opened the door, he paused one last time. "The real tragedy, Officer Bradley, is that you probably thought you were just doing your job. But tonight, you reminded me why my job still exists." Then, without another word, Marcus got in and drove off. No flashing lights. No dramatic music. Just the quiet departure of a man who didn't need to raise his voice because his truth was louder than anything else on that street. And behind him, Officer Bradley stood alone, the badge on his chest suddenly feeling a lot heavier than it had an hour ago. The footage Marcus captured that evening didn't just disappear into the depths of a filing cabinet. It didn't collect dust or sit ignored. It exploded. Within 48 hours, it reached the hands of the department's top brass, chiefs, city officials, and internal affairs analysts. The reaction was swift and definitive. Officer Bradley was suspended, pending a full investigation. But that wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. Internal Affairs launched a comprehensive review into Bradley's record, every complaint, every citation, every stop he ever made. And what they found was disturbing. Patterns. A trail of racial profiling going back years, stops made with no probable cause. Complaints of aggressive behavior toward minorities, most of which had been quietly dismissed or marked unfounded. Now, they weren't being ignored. For the first time, the veil of silence was lifted, and the truth was stepping into the light. And Marcus? He didn't stay quiet either. With permission from his department, he shared his experience, not with names, not with classified details, but with raw honesty. He spoke on national news programs, podcasts, and community panels. "This isn't just my story," he said during one interview. "It's the story of countless people who don't have a badge, who don't get to walk away." His words struck a chord across the country. Emails poured in, messages of support, of shared pain, of similar stories long buried. He wasn't just Marcus Hill, Director of Internal Affairs anymore. He was a voice that rose above the fear, a voice that dared to speak the uncomfortable truth. A voice that reminded the world that the problem wasn't just a few bad apples, it was a system that kept letting them rot. In his hometown, protests remained peaceful but powerful. People of all backgrounds marched, not just for Marcus, but for every unseen victim who never had a camera rolling. "Justice doesn't start in a courtroom," Marcus said in another public appearance. "It starts on the street. It starts with accountability. It starts with the badge and the heart behind it." Officer Bradley remained under investigation for weeks. The department released a statement acknowledging the incident, vowing reforms and retraining. But even deeper than disciplinary action, something else changed. The conversation. At local precincts, officers were required to take bias training. Ride-alongs were reviewed. Supervisors were tasked with auditing their team's behavior, not just their statistics. People started to care more about how law enforcement was done, not just what was done. Parents talked to their kids about their rights. Community leaders met with police departments to foster transparency. And departments around the country looked to Marcus's story as a blueprint for better conduct. Meanwhile, Marcus continued doing his job, not as a hero, but as a servant of justice. But people saw him differently now. He had gone through what so many others had, but with a twist. He had the authority to challenge it from within, and he did, not with rage. Not with revenge, but with purpose. He visited high schools, teaching young men and women of color how to engage safely and confidently with law enforcement. He created workshops for new officers, helping them understand not just the law, but the human behind the badge. He didn't want to be the exception. He wanted to be the example. "The uniform should protect people," he told one graduating class of cadets. "Not intimidate them, not dehumanize them. If you forget that, you're part of the problem." And slowly, things began to shift. One by one, officers took a deeper look at themselves. Some left the force, realizing they weren't meant for it. Others doubled down on their commitment to justice, inspired by Marcus's courage. And Bradley? He was officially dismissed from the department 3 months later. No pension, no retirement celebration, no honors. Just a quiet ending to a career that could have been noble, but wasn't. And for Marcus Hill, that wasn't cause for celebration. It was a reminder that silence protects no one, that justice needs voices, and that the hardest battles are often the ones we fight not with fists, but with truth. Sometimes, the most powerful act of resistance is staying calm when they expect you to explode. Marcus didn't just protect his rights, he changed the system from within. Let this be a lesson. Authority should never be abused, and no one is above accountability.